Ourselves, yes, first. You want to start with you, Paul? We're going to introduce ourselves first. Or Jack. Okay. Mike, make an introduction.
Mr. Coner, you want to introduce yourself? Sorry. You want to introduce yourself? We're going around the room.
Yeah, Rick Miller, Finance Committee. We've got
Lee
Lee.
Alexander, wife of Stephen Alexander, former investment advisor to Palm Beach School.
Steve Alexander, retired.
Leanne Evans, School District Treasurer.
Heather Frederick, Chief Financial Officer.
Richard Pingelli, PFM Asset Management.
Laura Howe, PFM Financial Advisors.
Laura Littlejohn, Office of General Counsel.
Kristen Vara, Office of General Counsel.
Well, welcome, and our guest, Mike. Yeah. Welcome all. All right, we don't have a long agenda, but we have an agenda.
Yeah, we do. Oh, and Ms. McQuinn is here. Our school board designee is here. And we also have Ron Haran and Christy Price from my office, and we have Kyle Jones joining us from PFM. Is he in Harrisburg? I didn't even ask when we spoke. So I want to jump right into that because I promised him that he'd go first.
Sure.
And we'd be able to let him go. He works on desk at PFM. So we've asked him to give us an update on what went on with banks and really talk about how it impacted, which it really didn't impact us. But I like to take opportunities. When something odd happens, it's a good opportunity to review what we do, see if there's room to improve, anything we can learn from the process. So Kyle's going to give us an overview. And I had it on the agenda originally as a banking crisis. And he said, it wasn't a crisis. It was, what did you call it? A kerfuffle.
A kerfuffle is the term that I'm using here.
There you go.
A good term.
So Kyle, I've got your presentation up on the screen. Thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate it. And Richard, thank you for arranging it. So I think the committee's going to enjoy the call today.
Perfect. Yeah, happy to. I don't know, Richard, did you want to have any introductory commentary, or do you want me to just hop in? Or
No, I think you can jump straight in. I think Leanne gave us a good sort of intro to sort of describe not only sort of what the school district's exposure is to the financial sector, but also what the sort of implications are going forward. So.
Yeah, oh, perfect. Yeah, thank you for that. And again, as Leanne alluded to, so, that was that conversation. Hey, there's all of these things that are going on in the news. Is this an opportunity? Let's take a fresh look at what we're doing in the portfolio, how this impacts, obviously the first questions that arose from everybody. My joke is, and I'm sad to say it's not a joke, 8 weeks ago, I'd never actually even heard of Silicon Valley Bank. And now I can probably write a case study on it if need be. But it caused us to take a deeper look. So I'll just give a little bit of background first on what happened with Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank. Silvergate is another bank that wound itself down in that same week. And when you take a look back, I would argue that there were a few factors that were at play. One, you had banks that grew really, really large, really quickly. Silicon Valley Bank has been well reported, large exposure to venture capital firms and startup firms. They were the bank of that industry. Signature Bank, really big. Same thing with Silvergate, really big in the crypto market. Those markets that have blown up here over the past couple of years, and so these banks grew along with them. So that was one thing I'll say. Very, very fast growth in very concentrated businesses. Second thing, uninsured deposits. That's something that a lot of people don't really think about. Folks like me and you, or you go to your to the bank, you don't really think about the money in there because anything up to $250,000, is guaranteed by the FDIC. If some unfortunate event were to happen and the bank were to fail, the bank's going to step in the next day and $250,000 per account is going to be made whole, and you don't really worry about things like that. Again, you remember number one, those concentrated large businesses, startup companies have a lot more than $250,000 per account, to the point where Signature Valley Bank, by all reports, had over 90% of their deposits above that $250,000 limit at the end of 2022. So a large amount of uninsured deposits. So there's kind of factor number two. Factor number three, last year, as we know, the Feds has raised rates significantly and aggressively through most of 2022 as they're looking to combat this rampantly high and very, very kind of persistently stubborn inflation. And with that, as everybody on here knows, I'm sure Richard said this a million times, when rates rise, your market values fall. That's what happened to these portfolios as well. And, the school district and almost every other public fund client that you think of does a really, really good job at thinking about how much money do I need? If I blow through this, what money might I need? And if I go through that pot, how do I get to the dollars that I think I'll never need? So that's an exercise that public entities do very, very well. I would argue that these banks did not do that great of an exercise there. And so the other kind of factor that you heard about was the duration of their portfolios being a lot longer than they needed. So that a mismatch, if you will, between when they needed dollars and when they were able to access those dollars responsibly. And so as things occurred, as rates rose and as deposits declined, they were simply in a position where they just ran out of money, quite frankly. They ran out of liquidity. So that's that interesting background. I told Leanne I was actually on a quasi vacation. I was coincidentally in Florida playing golf, and all I know is my phone keeps going off and I'm getting emails from everybody asking us about something called Silicon Valley Bank and do we have exposure. So first thing, obviously no exposure to Silicon Valley Bank, Silvergate, Signature Bank. Those are names that we didn't buy, we didn't purchase. They weren't on our platforms. Largely because our process and our credit process, which we can talk a little bit more about, tends to favor those larger, more diversified businesses, geographical diversification, product diversification. Those are things that we intentionally focus on in our credit process. So if you think about the narrative that we just covered, none of these names kind of fit that docket. So before going into the portfolio, I'll stop and see if there's any questions just generally about that part, about the reaction from the Treasury, from the Fed, anything like that. I'm more than happy to answer any of those questions. I just want to pause for a minute to make sure.
Question for you. Had the Fed recognized the problem of the lack of diversity with these banks?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the major question is not only the Fed, but other banks and creditors and investment advisors, what happened? Because, none of this information was hidden, all right? Right. Every quarter, at the end of every quarter, all of these statistics are widely reported. This is a situation that we've never seen, so those connections just weren't made, if you will. So it's not that the information wasn't there, just people didn't make the connection between uninsured deposits, long available for sale portfolio. You might hear that term, AFS portfolio. Long duration available for sale portfolios, unrealized losses. All of those stats are recognized. They're there. They're reported. That connection just wasn't made. As I'm sure you can understand, it's a keen focus. Since March 8th, everybody's focusing on it now.
Hadn't that happened long ago with the savings and loan crisis many years ago?
Yeah, go back to the late 80s, and it was a very similar situation where rates kind of rose significantly. And you're right, you had that savings and loan crisis. Folks have short memories, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
All right, thank you.
Of course. So I'll take that, and now we'll go into the portfolio, and we'll start to think about, what is the exposure in portfolios to different sectors and banks and things of that nature. And then we'll kind of talk a little bit about our preference for diversification and how we implement that into the district's portfolio. So you're seeing this credit summary here, and this is just the credit exposure. So we said, hey, we're not talking about treasuries and agencies and things of that nature. Let's look at that credit exposure. And what you'll see here in the upper left-hand corner is that from the industry, 97% of the portfolio is in financials. That's largely because, the critical mass of the dollars that PFMAM is managing for the district is in a short-term portfolio. And at the end of the year, when tax receipts are up and the dollars and the balances are at their peak, we use that opportunity to ladder largely in commercial paper, which is 9 months and in on the maturity band on the yield curve. So we use those dollars to really maximize the income potential associated with those during a relatively short time horizon. You can see in the upper right-hand corner, around 67% of it is bank. So you may say, what's the difference between a bank versus a financial versus a special purpose bank? And they're all kind of financials because, the bank is going to be at the bank level. This is going to be probably a little bit more technical than we want to cover. But there's the bank level debt, and then there's a holding company level debt as well. So that's really the difference between bank and financial. And then there's asset-backed commercial paper, which also issued by a lot of these same financial institutions. So those three in aggregate kind of really make up the financial exposure. But all, again, very, very high quality. You can see there in the lower right-hand corner that 96%, we're using Moody's ratings here of P1, which is their highest short-term rating category there. If we go to the next slide, and this is where we just said, well, look, let's just look at the portfolio, and we looked at the underlying credit issuers, and we looked at it at two different time frames. We looked at it as we pulled this together a couple of days ago. So that first kind of column is going to be April 24th, and then the second column is going to be December 31st, because we kind of wanted to use this as an opportunity to break out and really show how we apply the diversification again in the portfolio. So on the left-hand side, you can see, some of the names in the bank. You don't see names like, the some of the smaller names that you're hearing out there, the Key West. We don't have exposure to a lot of those names that you're hearing here. Really the smaller banks that you'll see are going to be banks like PNC and Truist, which are really large mid-sized banks. So again, I think that really one goes to show, again, that preference for those larger, well-diversified names. You'll also see the exposure, and we broke this into two different levels. The percent of just a credit portfolio, and then the percent of the overall portfolio. And we did it now, and we also went back in to do it at the end of December, because again, that's really when these dollars would have been put to work. That's when these purchases would have been made. And we're showing a number, and I'm just going to look at TD, Toronto Dominion at the top. You'll see a 6.4% allocation, and that's based simply on the assets that PFM manages, which is a little less than half of, or right around half of the district's overall dollars. So a lot of that to just break down. We generally focus, and at the end of the year, we work with staff, we work with Leanne to understand the overall asset base that we're working with. It was around the 2 billion number at the end of the year. So you're talking about 3% allocations, is what you'll kind of get to at the end of the day. And I think that that's reflective of our viewpoint. There are a lot of managers that think that, having a concentrated credit position, I'm going to follow just a few names. I'm going to know them very, very well. And I'm comfortable having a 5, 6, 7, 8, 10% allocation per name. That's not our style. That's not our process. We think that when we hear that term, prudent risk management, having a lower allocation to a broader array of names, we think is the way to implement that. So usually we target, and again, we work with staff on that, around that 3% max issuer exposure there at the end of the, as these dollars are being put to work, so that if there is some unfortunate process, and again, we try our best to avoid them. We've been unscathed so far, so knock on wood. I'm literally knocking on my desk right now. You don't want to have an outsized amount of the district's dollars in any single issuer. So you'll kind of see that there. And on the next slide,
Before you go, if you go back up, I noticed some names I don't know very well on that list, particularly toward the top. And then you got National Australia and stuff like that. Well, I'm thinking of that, and then Credit Agricole. No idea what that is. In other words, are these large, important banks?
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, that was a question. Yeah, so these are all large banks. A lot of them are going to be large multinational banks that issue out of the U.S. So there'll be names that a lot of them are European names. Credit Ag is a European name. So yes, that's the question. But these are all large. Most of them are quote unquote GSIBs, as a name that you'll hear. Globally systemic institutional banks are important banks. I'm sorry, that's a term that came out of the financial crisis. Globally significant, significantly important banks. Okay, so we use the term GSIB so much you forget what the acronym actually stands for. And those are names that, all of those names that you kind of mentioned are those GSIBs. Why is that important? Because to operate here in the US, these are also the same names that Congress and the Fed and everybody else has higher and stronger capital requirements on. So those names that you mentioned fall under that.
But do
kind of
they have
category.
the higher, stronger capital requirements because it's necessary? Or
No,
because,
because coming out of 08, 09, the Fed and everybody else basically said, if something were to happen to these banks, the fallout goes well beyond just that bank. So that's where you hear the term about increased capital and increased regulatory requirements. They just made these names. Same things like J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, Citigroup. All of these are also in that GSIB category. So they just required them to have a higher capital requirements than some of the mid-sized and smaller banks, just because of the role that they play in the overall kind of global financial system.
yeah, but I don't see much of the JP Morgan. I guess it's down at the bottom there. I don't see much
Yeah,
of
you see
that.
some of it down there at the bottom. You'll also see some of the special purpose funds. Those are asset-backed security paper. Thunder Bay is also is JP Morgan. They just have kind of weird names associated with them.
Okay.
I'll stop and pause there. Again, any other questions from the group? And if not, Richard, you can tell me, or Leanne, you can tell me at what altitude you like me to fly when we talk about our approach to credit and things that we tend to look at. I'll kind of ask for your guidance there.
But before we go on, I wanted to mention to the committee, when all this was happening, and I knew we did not have any investments in the banks that were in trouble, but I was interested in how much of our portfolio was in financials. And it is a significant portion because in December, when we get all the tax revenues in, we're buying commercial paper and short-term securities. Most of it is financials. That's just the nature of it. And I asked the question, what if I put limits? Because I remember 2008, 9, when banks were failing one after the other, I said, I don't want, and Steve remembers me saying this, don't buy any banks. I don't want any banks. So I asked the question, what if I said I want to limit financials to no more than 15 or 20% of the portfolio? And the answer I got back very quickly is,
Doesn't work.
there won't be anything to invest in. So there really aren't a lot of options. So I'm moving towards the idea of coming up with a report so that we can see how much we have in different sectors. Right now, the system that we have has a field for that. We're working with PFM to get a list of all the securities with the sectors because they track that in their system. So I want to sync them up so that we can add that into our quarterly investment report as informational. I think it's good to see.
Yeah,
what-
does
what sectors are
PFM
in.
rank within the groups? In other words, these big international banks and these investments, do they have their own
We're going to
ranking?
get into their credit process next.
Yeah,
That's the
okay.
next thing we're going to get into.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue. And again, I agree with you. And to that point, that commercial paper market, something in the 70 to 80% of commercial paper issuance is financials. So that's where the critical mass of that issuance occurs. To that point on, well, what else would we purchase on? What will we purchase? So again, the idea of diversification is what we try to emphasize here.
Right. We do have one more question.
Yeah, the other question, obviously, your biggest expense is payroll. The day before payroll, you're obviously putting money into a bank account that's going to exceed the normal limits. So,
Yeah,
is there anything we should consider changing regarding how we hold the money the night before a payroll?
in Florida, and we're going to talk, I think we're going to get into this in the next agenda item with House Bill 3 on governance, but governments in Florida are required to hold their money in what's called a qualified public depository. So it's a bank that has placed collateral with the state, with a third party that's managed by the state of Florida. So once a year, they have us give them the balances and how much money we have in every bank account. And we have to sign off on that, and they match that up with what the bank is saying to verify that they have adequate collateral. I've actually had conversations last week with the Bureau of Collateral Management. We're going to get to a couple of reasons why I asked that. I don't want to get into that just yet, but I'm not really concerned about the banks because of the level of collateral that the state requires the banks to hold. I think we're good with that. That was the first thing when it came up, and I was reaching out to Ms. Frederick. I said, our bank accounts are fine. We're checking to make sure we don't own any of these banks. And then I said, here's just a list of them. So I ran a list of the securities. I didn't have an easy way to identify which were financials. And some of them, you recognize the name, which ones are banks. The ones that stumped me a little bit were, I had to look these up to see which bank is set these up. They are a securitization of, it's asset-backed securities, right? And they fall under the credit rating of the bank that set them up. So that one that Kyle mentioned was JP Morgan. There was actually another one that has matured since then. But I do want a way to be able to track it within our system. So we're looking at that right now. And Richard has assured me they're tracking it too. So it may be something that I say, can you give me access to that report in the online platform that they have? Just so that I think that's good information to have. And we're going to try to find a way to fit that into the quarterly reports. Just informational. I think that's one of the things I got out of what's happened in the last couple of months. It's good to know. It's always good to have information.
And I can say, I mean, and these are great questions to ask, right? So, you take that. So, for instance, we roll the exposure at the ultimate parent company's name. So whether it's a 2-year bond, a 3-month commercial paper, or one of these asset-backed commercial paper names, we think about the exposure at the parent company name, which I think is something that's also important. So again, we can definitely help. Again, Leanne, as you're pulling that information together to make sure that the data is available and that
you have what you need, because you're right. I mean, tracking and monitoring this, we're doing it on our end. You should be doing that on your end as well, as a fiduciary. So we're more than happy to make sure you have the appropriate information.
Okay, any other questions before we go into the credit process? Because that's one of the most important things I want to make sure we get to today. Because that's really what all the questions are about. When we're buying securities, PFM has their own credit process, and it's not just ratings, and I'm going to let Kyle walk through that, but that's one of the reasons I'm comfortable with the securities that we hold. So Cal, I'll let you jump right in.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And so you're right. As I'm sure you know, a little bit over a year ago, we joined forces with U.S. Bank Asset Management, and one of the really great benefits to our clients associated with that was a deeper bench as it pertains to credit research and credit analysis. So with that, most of this work is done between 2 different teams, as we're showing here on the slide. The credit research group, which has analysts that are dedicated to, not only corporate credit, but also a team that focuses on municipal credit. And they're doing that fundamental credit research, not simply relying on rating agencies. That's the unfortunate. You always have those memories. Silicon Valley Bank was an A-rated name on a Monday and failed by Friday. So that just really goes to show you that you can't depend solely on rating agencies. You do need to have your own opinion and do your own kind of fundamental credit work. And the credit research group is the group that does that and maintains and generates the approved issuers list. And no portfolio manager is able to buy a name outside of the guidance of the credit research team. So those types of checks and balances are in place. Then on the right-hand side, there's a credit risk management committee, and that's within PFM Asset Management. Very similar. We've managed money for the district for a while. So we talked about the credit committee. Now it's the credit risk strategies committee, which takes that work of the credit research group and really applies them to PFM asset management portfolios. So I talked earlier about
our philosophy on diversification and maximum allocation, those decisions are made, monitored, and implemented by the Credit Risk Management Committee. We think about the idea of, if your portfolio or your investment policy requires A or better, even if there's a name that has an A rating, but it doesn't, for lack of a better term, it doesn't feel like an A-rated name. It feels more like a triple B-rated name. Well, then those are names that the committee will restrict and say, well, we're not going to buy these in our public fund portfolios that have a risk tolerance that doesn't align with the credit metrics of this name. So that's the work that's done on the Credit Risk Management Committee, that additional layer. But again, to Leanne's point, it's not simply relying on the credit ratings, but doing some of that fundamental work. And the next slide is where we're showing some of the things that we're looking at. And of course, not surprisingly, a lot of that work is going to be very, very similar to some of the things that the credit agencies are looking at because, it's the same data. But we do formulate our own opinion. And there are times where, we may have a different viewpoint relative to a credit rating agency. Are there things that we'll just simply say with our slightly more conservative bent, our slightly more conservative approach to evaluating credit, we're going to take a more conservative approach. So you can see some of those things there. I'll kind of start on the right-hand side. You can see, or at the top, the fundamental analysis, that bottoms up issuer specific work. We're looking at, and we have access to several third-party sources of data, all the rating agency data. So we're thinking about it not only from the bottoms up, but from the top down. Fundamentally, the bond nerd terms I use are idiosyncratic risk and systemic risk. So idiosyncratic risk is, I'll start with systemic risk. Generally speaking, macro-oriented, what's going on in the financial service industry and what impact might that have on all financial issuers? That's simply systemic risk. Very little you can do about that. Then there's idiosyncratic risk, which are things like how much uninsured deposits are on a bank's balance sheets. What's the duration of their assets? And that's just a different lens and a different set that's going to be specific to that portfolio. From that, we develop a base case. What do we think? What's the credit structure? What's our fundamental outlook on the name? And then either it goes to either it's approved or it's not. And I think one of the important factors is that there's an ongoing process there. It's not a set it and forget it. We're constantly monitoring it. And again, the idea of having a deeper bench, allows us to cover names far deeper than we were able to, even before, where we still had a strong amount of resources allocated to this function. So I thought it'd be useful to provide a little bit of real world context. So what do we do in March? So this happens, and our initial step was to say, well, hey, look, we don't think that this is the financial crisis. This isn't 08, 09. The markets quickly differentiated, this kerfuffle from what we saw in 2008 and 2009. We said this just isn't different. This is just different. And then the second differentiation was, it's really specific risk associated with some banks. So our initial step was, yes, let's just put all financial names on hold because the systemic risk was there. The systemic risk was high. We didn't think it elevated to a level where we needed to go and sell all financials. That was a knee-jerk reaction. We didn't think we needed to do that. But we did want to pause for a second and go through and look again. So we asked the credit research team, which they had already started to do, not surprisingly, hey, let's look at the banks on our name with these new factors that we're thinking, not new factors, but the new connections on some of these factors that we've been thinking about. Let's take a fresh look at them again and kind of understand, are we comfortable with the positioning of the names in the portfolio? And again, not surprisingly, we were. There were a couple of smaller banks that wouldn't that we would have bought in a kind of portfolios with a different risk tolerance in our kind of public entities, names that we didn't buy in the district's portfolio anyway. That we said, hey, we're not going to buy this name here now. But generally speaking, again, we were very, very comfortable with the exposures there. But I think the ability to, in a very, very short order, kind of formulate a refreshed view, given the circumstances that were in the marketplace,
is a testament, if you will, to some of to the credit process. And I think the last slide that I had here, just to kind of look at the volatility, and you know, the term that you hear, unprecedented and volatility, you know, you can't use them enough here in this environment, I would argue. You know, what we're showing here is the change in daily yields there throughout the quarter. And you know, I've been in this business for 20 years at this point, and I've gone entire, you know, months and quarters without seeing a 20 basis point change on the 2-year. And we went through a phase there, we were averaging that on a daily basis. You know, we had, you know, one day where we lost 57 basis points on a 2-year in a single day. So, you know, markets are reacting very, very quickly as, you know, their question was, well, what does this mean for growth? What does this mean for the Fed? What does this mean for future rate hikes or potential cuts? And as all of those factors were kind of working their way through the system, you just saw unprecedented volatility there. It's kind of like a roller coaster ride here. But that was just the reality of it. Again, as the market really digested, what does this mean for the broader economy? So that's what I had as far as prepared comments are concerned. I probably talked more than Leanne wanted me to, so I apologize for that up front. But again, I do want to stop and pause and see if there's any questions from the group that I didn't ask.
Any questions? I've got one. Is your analysis computer driven, or do you have individuals overlooking what you're doing?
Individuals. Yeah, so our credit research team is around 8 individuals, 8 senior credit analysts that are doing this fundamental work.
Super.
I wanted to mention to the committee that, you know, once we looked at the portfolios, my next question was to look at the investment pools, because those local government investment pools are buying commercial paper. So I'm on the investment advisory committee for Florida Palm, so I get to see that information on a regular basis. Mrs. McQuinn is on the board, so she gets to see those regularly. But then I immediately sent, here's the link to Florida Prime, which is what the old SBA. And I kicked that over there. Take a look. Do you see anything unusual? Does it look okay? Everything looks good. Federated is running that shop now really well. And then the other layer of investments we have are money markets. And we're using government only, so they have a stable net asset value, but it's only investing in governments. So, you know, we're very comfortable with where we're at. But I thought this discussion would be really good for the committee to hear the depth of review that's going on in the portfolio, and to get in my brain a little bit of the questions that I was asking, just to make sure that we were in good shape. Are there any questions?
So the state funds are doing okay, as you
Yes.
think?
Yeah, everything's good.
Super.
Yeah. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I don't know if you have any closing comments. I think you wrapped it up already, but.
No, thank you. Again, just know if there's any questions, please don't hesitate. We're more than happy to provide information. Again, Leanne and the rest of the committee, as you're working to, you know, enhance reporting, we're happy to play a role there, and happy to join. Next time I'll make sure I'm there in person. Again, apologies.
That'll be great. He had a conflict that he couldn't avoid, but we're glad you could join us online today. So again, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And you're welcome
Thank
to
you.
stay through the rest of the meeting, but I know you have things to do probably.
Yeah, I need to go. It's like she was being generous. My conflict is that my wife took the vacation day and she's on the plane to Vegas right now. So I'm going to go drop my 6-year-old off at school here. So, but
Thank you, Kyle.
have a good day.
You
All right.
too.
Thanks, all.
Okay, so before we get into the next topic, I wanted to go ahead and take a minute, and I was trying to figure out where in the agenda to put it, because you all know we had invited Steve to come to our meeting in December when we had the farewell for Dr. McDaniel, and we had a gift for Steve as well, and then he had the flu and couldn't get here. So he generously agreed to come down. Sebby, we get to see him and wish him well. So we do have a gift for you, so feel free to open it. And
Can I say a few words?
you can talk. Am I going to stop you, Steve?
I was going to do the market update. No, it's great to be back here. It's funny that as I saw the bank situation going on, I thought of all of you, and I thought, you know, that the great structure that's in place here, the oversight the transparency, all of you on the committee, Leanne, and of course, Richard and staff. This was the one place I was not worried about, and after being here, I think for 24 years, I've been coming to this building and doing the investments. In fact, this committee first started under my recommendation for an investment committee, and it grew into the finance committee. And you're probably one of the few school districts, as well as any local governments in Florida, that have such a comprehensive approach. And it's proud to see that you guys are continuing, you're organized, you're taking on the issues, the structures in place between short-term and long-term, and the credit quality that these, we've been through a number of crises since I've been here on the 24 years, and we avoided every single one of them. And I think that's because of the oversight and the structure that's in place that is an envy of a lot of local governments. And now that I'm retired, I can easily say now that this is probably my favorite place to be. I don't have to worry about all the other clients hearing that.
Well, we know the food's good and the gifts should be too.
Yeah, the food's good, and you always have good warm coffee, so that's always helpful. The hard part here is the 8 o'clock. As Lee and I was getting ready this morning, I said, oh my God, 8 o'clock, who does that? I don't get out, nothing happens until 9 or something, but 8 is early. So thank God we came in the night before. But again, it's just great to see all of you. It's been a pleasure working with Leanne. We've been through a lot. When we think of the credit crisis, this little bank hiccup is really nothing. It's a blip on the page compared to what we went through in 2008 when the whole world was falling apart, and we got through it all very nicely, and we set the stage for everybody else. So, but I wanted to thank everybody that I've worked with here over the years. Actually, I was talking earlier, I started with Don Taylor, who was the treasurer. I think some of you guys remember Don Taylor. So that's how far we go back with this organization. When I think back of those days versus now, it's night and day difference. I mean, kudos to all the staff and the attorneys and everybody who works at Palm Beach. You guys have really done a remarkable job in bringing this district to a very sophisticated level. And I see that Leanne's constantly making tweaks and growing, so that's important. So many thanks to all of you. It's been a pleasure to work with you. It's been an honor to work with all of you on the committee and Leanne and staff, and thanks for the gift today.
Steve, I don't know, you probably don't know, when I came in as treasurer, we had to write an investment policy. So he came in, we sat in my office, and we wrote the investment policy. He had a template, we filled it all out and got it all ready. But we've worked through a lot of things. I've learned a lot from you as well. And couldn't have done what I've done without you. So thank you so much.
I think the committee and the staff would agree that you've been ahead of the game. When there have been crises and the rest of them, you're the Johnny on the spot. The first one there.
I have all this gray hair.
Well, it was super. And then we had people like this great committee and Bill Moore who jump on things as well.
Right.
So it's-
Well, I remember when there was the problem with the SBA years ago, and Steve brought it to my attention. I brought it to the committee, and it was Bill Moore that said,
Bill Moore.
I had said, we'll take all the money out. He said, no, put your sneakers on and do it now.
Yes, he
And
did.
we did it right here.
He
in
said,
this
what
room.
time is it?
Yeah, we withdrew
And you do it within an hour.
while the
I think
committee
it was
doing-
350 million.
300, it was 300 million, I think.
300
million.
Yep.
Yeah, and we didn't lose, but others lost big time and had their money socked away for a time.
We do really have a great team. We've worked with Steve and now with Richard, and there's a lot of depth to PFM. That's one of the reasons that we continue to work with them, because there is so much depth. Not that we're not going to miss Steve, but there's lots of other people there to help us do things. So between PFM, the work that we've done, our team, the committee, I can't speak highly enough of this committee. And we really are the envy. I get comments all the time. Everyone wishes they had a committee like this. So thank you all as well.
It's probably impossible to put together one like this.
Dream team, well said.
Open the
Okay.
present,
All right.
and then we're going to get into legislation stuff.
Oh, boy, exciting.
I just want to say that I remember Steve from the South Florida Water Management District, and I won't say any more about that.
Mr. Baldwin, you had your hand up for a second? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. You know, my career actually started with the whole debacle at Orange County, California. So when I was a treasurer of Orange County, a lot of the things I brought to PFM, I learned through that crisis, when that system fell apart. And as a treasurer of Orange County, I had a conservative,
You were Orange County, Florida.
Orange County, Florida, right. And so I was sitting in my office in Orange County, Florida, and I was getting calls from contractors who were building the Orange County Convention Center. Those days, you know, the convention center was rocking and rolling. We were issuing bonds almost every day, and I think certain people here remember those days. And there were probably $200-300 million a phase or so. So contractors were calling me and said, "Oh my gosh, Steve, are you going to be able to pay the bills? I hear that Orange County is going to bankruptcy." But, you know, all the papers said Orange County. They didn't say Orange County, California. So I made a big banner. This is back in the day when printers were still dot matrix. Remember dot matrix? You know, it took about 3 hours to create a document. And it said Orange County, Florida, the home of no derivatives. And we put it over the comptroller's office, which was an elected office, and then it got in the Wall Street Journal that Orange County, Florida does not have any derivatives, and that sort of began that. But those were critical lessons learned about how to put a portfolio together for local governments, and it spilled into the whole SBA situation. But when I do think back, the California situation was the crisis that really hit local governments nationwide.
I think the SEC stepped in there in Orange County, California.
In fact, everybody did.
Yeah.
In fact, when I first got hired at PFM, one of my first assignments was interesting. I had to go to Orange County, California,
You did.
and help work on the new investment policy.
My partner,
Oh, no.
one of my partners, actually was appointed by the SEC to oversee the revitalization of Orange County, California. Stanley Keller. That's beautiful. You know what to ignore.
Thank you for many years of service, School Board of Palm Beach County Finance Committee, and it was dated in December. I thought you
I'm a little slow these days.
But thank you very much for
Thank you.
everything.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Can I just wanted to say real quick, I guess I've been around for 18 of the years, and I feel like Leanne is a good friend now after all these years. And I will second what Steve said. He loves so many clients, but there were tears over this one. And I was with him when he stopped by to tell Leanne I'm retiring, and he walked out, and I'm like, "You were both in there crying, weren't you?" And he said, "Maybe." But I just, you know, I've been along the ride, and I know a bunch of the gentlemen back there because I'm with PFM Asset Management as well. And I tell you what, I just appreciate all the kindness and all of the years of support of Steve, and I'm just super proud. It's a weird time in our lives right now. So everything I do now that generally had his name on an agenda and it's not there, I'm like, okay, Richard Pingelli. It's Richard, which is great. It's just, you know, it's odd. So I just want to thank y'all for just
You're going to
being
continue to be the
stellar.
party planner extraordinaire?
I'm going to continue that, and client training extraordinaire. So I'm not going anywhere, right, Richard?
We're not losing Lee.
So
Any
just thank
comments
y'all.
for anybody? Congratulations, Steve.
All right, thank you, sir. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, now we get to get into legislation. Sorry, I don't know how to make that a good segue there. There is a lot going on in Tallahassee. Session, I think everything's supposed to be done on Tuesday? We're hoping?
That's for the budget.
The budget,
They
yes.
have until Tuesday, and the end of session is May 7th.
So we wanted to go through, and Laura put a presentation together on House Bill 3, which has come up, and I think once we get through this, Richard may chime in, and I'm going to chime in as well, because the bill is expanded to more than just what we're going to talk about, the ESGs. So Laura, do you want to I'll move the slides, you just tell me when to go.
Sure. So this is just a couple points of what's covered in House Bill 3, which Leanne and Richard can go way into more on where it goes into the banking side. It did pass the House as House Bill 3. It has passed the Senate. It's awaiting the governor's signature. It does prohibit the issuance of ESG bonds. I think this is called like the anti-woke legislation that's been out there in the news. It does ban an issuer from paying a third party to certify that a bond may be labeled or designated as an ESG bond. And it prohibits utilizing any rating agency whose ESG score can have a direct negative impact on the issuer's bond rating. For the school district, we've never, really looked at the ESG paying for green bonds. There's some issuers within the state that have done that have had a certification. There's been a lot of discussion over the years as to whether there's actually any benefit when you go to price in the market on those bonds for it to be labeled ESG to those issuers. We do know that these are factors that have been looked at for years. It's just in more recent years, it's come to be named ESG in the rating agencies, which is what we'll dive into, that there's a lot of other components. I would like to say before any other discussion about banking comes up, there is an exemption within the bill that outlines for all the different designations of what would prohibit you on the banking side, that the underwriters are not included in that. So while Leanne and Richard can speak to the banking side of how this bill will impact potentially that industry, there is a carve out. So the underwriters where you may have heard in Texas, there's been issues that they can't perform their duties there because of certain policies within their organizations that has been excluded in Florida. So we'll dive in quickly to the rating agencies because this is just a small piece of this, and Leanne and Richard can talk more about the rest of the bill. We did have a call with Moody's. They have included scorecards before that cover the ESG scores for the district, and this is from Moody's slide deck. So it outlines the factors that go into each of the environmental, social, and governance. The social and governance, I think, is probably pretty common as to what people think go into the rating agencies. What's going on within the community for your social, the housing, the education opportunities that are there, your labor and income, your wealth factors that trend into that. So this is all, factors that people think of when you think of what the rating agency is going to do and your ability to pay debt, as well as the governance. Heavily into how financials are managed, the policies that are there, the transparency that's there, the budget management, and then the environmental, which really in the state of Florida is nothing new. When a hurricane comes through and we've had to talk to the rating agencies, how has that impacted? What schools were impacted? How is the FEMA money coming in? What are your plans for this? The insurance policies that filter into this. So a lot of these factors are not new. It's just they've taken criteria that's within their scorecards and put this in these categories to be able to make a rating out of it. And that's where we'll talk about how the legislation could potentially get tricky for this. So this is an example as well, again, from Moody's slide deck. They do an overall issuer profile score, and then they also do each credit impact score. So they go from very highly negative, which is a 5, up to positive, which is a 1. And so the issuer profile scores, which is on the right-hand side, you'll see, and we'll get to this on the next slide, but it's the environmental, social, and governance. Each one gets their own score, and they're labeled E, S, and G with the respective number for their risk factor. And then that pulls into the overall credit impact score. So that drives into what on this slide is a CIS 4. So if we want to go to the next slide, this is specific for Palm Beach schools from Moody's. I would like to note that the overall credit impact score is neutral to low, so the CIS 2. And you'll see that the social issuer profile and the governance issue profile are both an S2 and G2. And we would say that typically for most of Florida school districts, your social and governance issue profile, they're probably all about a C or a level 2, a S and G. And a lot of that is ability to raise revenues, if they're budgeting appropriately, all of those things that pull into there. And then the environmental, it really is being driven down to a 4, which is due to the hurricanes and potential flooding, which I don't think is a surprise to anyone. And this is where, when we pull into this and we had the conversation with Moody's, the hurricanes that came through, and I give this as an example, we were working with Sarasota County School District. The hurricane had just hit over there on the coast, and we had the conversations with the rating agencies, and they were still able to obtain an upgrade, even though their rating factor would be an E4 as well due to the hurricanes, those other factors that pull into it. So the conversations that we had had with Moody's is really, if all of a sudden the general fund balance for the school district started to decline greatly, unemployment in the area went up significantly, say a really hard-hitting recession hit and the district all of a sudden started managing their finances very poorly, those factors would then trickle down into this profile. Those are things that are already being rated, and so that's where the legislation would get tricky, because they could potentially be downgraded on management issues that they're doing, things that within the district's control, that then when it's outlined, their ESG score factor would also be lower, which.
So are we not going to be able to use Moody's is the
We
question?
will. So right now, and we've talked about this, this is, when we have conversations with the rating agencies, and we've had conversations over the last several years about potential as to reasons to have upgrades for the district because of financial policy and how well it's been managed. And so these conversations, specifically for the district, we do not see that there's going to be any issue coming forward. There would be leading indicators going into this that there would be a downgrade. So before any time we talk to a rating agency, if there's any sort of concern on how things are being managed within the district, that wouldn't be news to us before we talk to them that there could be a potential negative outlook or a downgrade. So we don't anticipate this being a problem. It's been, in the news some about this language that's in there and how it's going to impact the state. There could be some issuers, that have that problem for the school district, though we do not anticipate it being an issue.
From what I'm hearing, and maybe you can square it for me, rating agencies who do this, are they going to be eliminated from our possibility of use?
So according to the legislation, if there's a direct negative impact from ESG scores, you cannot utilize that rating agency. So in our conversations with Moody's, the question was if the district has a downgrade in their rating and how that would potentially trickle into the ESG scorecard. Could it be perceived to be a negative direct impact of
Well, even if
ESG
they're doing
factors?
even if they're doing the analysis, it sounds like you're overboard. Even if the ESG analysis is being made, or am I wrong in hearing that?
Well, so all of these factors are things that the rating agencies have been utilizing for years in creating it. And so this is nothing new when we, talk to Leanne. So we don't anticipate it being an issue right now. It's just moving forward, we need to be aware of it and how we would potentially handle that situation if it came to be. We don't see, we know that there's been extra money from federal funds that have come in over the years that have padded the fund balance that will be drawn down. That won't result in a credit negative action because that's a planned draw. So those are the conversations that we just continue to have with the rating agencies to make sure that there's that open dialogue, that there won't be an issue. And
You want to come up to one of the mics, and that way, make sure the green dot's on, the light's on.
Press the button.
Yeah, I had a recent conversation with one of the rating agencies, and I think it's more from their perspective because they could be banned from
Yeah.
doing any ratings in the
That's what
state.
I'm thinking
And I
of.
think one of the individuals kind of said that they're going to start a process of reviewing, particularly the Florida ones, such that it's the languages, if there is a downgrade, that it's not specifically stated to the ESG. But Laura's right. I mean, all the ESG components are looked at as a whole, I think it's obviously the S that the legislation is focused at. But I think it's, from the rating agency, there's a big risk that I think they're going to start processes where they just don't want to specifically state that it's an
They
ESG.
make that analysis.
Right,
Because it sounds like if they do, they're out.
yes, right,
That's a terrible
right.
concept.
Yeah, that would be good.
And on that point, Moody's is internally having discussions. We do know this, but their policy is not to comment on any pending legislation. So until the governor puts this in effect, they won't put out any. So we're waiting to see, once the governor signs this, what Moody's response will be and how they'll handle it. Obviously, for their business sake as well, you know, they would want to make sure, and they're very aware of how this all interplays and the potential for, you know, the tail to wag the dog, so.
This seems like 1984 to me,
Yeah.
right?
The other part of the other language in the bill, and I read this part of it a month ago when it first came out. One of the things we're going to talk about a little later is contracts, and we do have a banking ITN out on the street right now. And questions were raised, how are we going to react to House Bill 3? And I had to go look. They've added language in there, changing the definition of a qualified public depository, actually indicating that the banks, and Richard, correct me if I say this wrong, because I probably will, but they added language in there to say the banks cannot discriminate against customers based on, and they go through its religion, personal preferences, but then somehow they fit it in there for gun manufacturers. They actually have that in the bill. So for going back to what happened in Texas, if you have banks that have a strong stance against guns, that could create a problem with them being a qualified depository in Florida. That's the way I read the bill. There's still, I've talked to the office, the Bureau of Collateral Management. They're waiting to see how it's implemented. I can't get any feedback from them. They're waiting to see how the bill is actually, if it's signed. But there's a lot of things in this particular bill that impacts us financially. Richard, did I miss something?
No, yeah, so it defines unsafe and unsound practices for QPDs. And as you said, they're still sort of working through how banks will, attest to that, kind of meet that requirement. I'll sort of add also that there's another component. The bill will modify 218.415 and actually incorporate some new provisions that local governments cannot use these ESG factors and ESG scoring in making their investment decisions. So it's very broad-reaching, broad-ranging. When we get the final, we'll sort of incorporate that into the analysis of the district's investment policy as well.
Right. And the investment policy, I was planning to bring that to you in December, but we had so much going on. There's a lot on today's agenda. And we'll talk about, I want to add another meeting in, and I have that on a slide coming up, because we do need to look at our investment policy. And I've talked to Richard more in the last 2 or 3 weeks than we had in a little while, about, all the various issues. And is there anything specific we need to put in the policy based on the legislation? And I think we're waiting to see what it looks like when it's done. But we may be bringing something back to add language into the policy. Okay.
Any comment from Paul? Mike? Are you feeling like I am? This is the brave new world. Kind of like your thinking and your analysis is limited.
We've had some strange encounters with Moody's and all at where I work, and we're concerned about some of the things that they do.
Well, particularly the Solid Waste Authority with all the environmental aspects.
Yes. And it's there. So,
Tough when you can't think, tell others how to think.
There is one other bill that I just wanted to mention. We're still It's not done yet. I think, last I heard, the House and the Senate were much closer, but they have 1259 on the capital outlay.
I think that one's.
That one's
pretty-
done?
I'm pretty sure that one's pretty much settled based on our
Okay.
that last analysis.
It's going to require that we share the 1.5 mils with charter schools. So remember, it was 2 mils, now it's 1.5 mils. And it's going to be rolled out, ramped up. So it'll be based on a per student allocation. And it would be 20% in next year in '24, then 40, 60, 80, up to 100. You do get to deduct the debt service payments for debt issued prior to March 2017. There is some talk about whether or not they may expand that to debt previously issued as of the date the bill passes. But we've been tracking that March 2017 date since 2017. But that would impact our capacity to borrow going forward. So I've already run numbers on that. When we get ready to do, we have a debt issue that we'll probably be looking at in our August meeting. Still waiting for some numbers. So probably in August, we'll be talking about a debt issue, and we'll look at that as part of the capital plan and looking at future debt issues to see how it's going to impact.
How about operating issues? Aren't there substantial operating issues?
On the operating side, yes, but first to quantify the amount we're going to have to share in capital outlay, so $440 million out of our 10-year plan. So it's significant. And then this year, the legislators also passed, and it's already been signed by the governor, House Bill 1, which is a significant expansion of the voucher program. Just understanding what that impact is going to be in the future there's just a lot of uncertainty. It looks like the growth of vouchers is going to exceed that of charter school enrollment in just a 5-year time frame, where it took charter schools 10 years to get to the amount of enrollment that they're at. So the growth is very exponential. And so we're and a lot of the students that are going to now be included within the voucher program are students that never would have been part of the public school system. So all it's doing is just expanding the number of the enrollment statewide that the state is funding, that they never would have funded to begin with. So it's going to start to, water down the amount of per student funding that we receive. So it's likely going to have a pretty significant and potentially negative impact on public education. We know we need to compete. We agree we need to compete, but it also needs to be fair. And right now it's not. It's really, truly not a level playing field. And so that's just looking at the expansion of the voucher program. There's also some bills out there with our Florida retirement system, which at the same time, kind of interesting is that the House is proposing rolling back all the changes that Governor Scott put in place back in 2011. A lot of people don't know we don't have a cost of living increase in our pension after 2011. And so there's some proposals. The proposal in the House is to add those back in, but it has a pretty significant cost. And in this year, it would be $57 million just for our district. It would be $1 billion statewide. So we don't know how likely that's going to be, but really the House and Senate are so far apart. And in looking at the school budget, the education budgets, the House is leading on that. So you don't know. You don't know which side they're going to end up on. Did the Senate give up and cave very quickly on the education side because the House is going to then cave on the FRS? Because it's all just backdoor dealings. So we're waiting to see where we end up. And that's what it seems like pretty much every legislative session. All the decisions are made behind closed doors now, and then they just come out at the end and say, this is what we have to deal with. And we always deal with it. We always balance our budget. The only other item that I wanted to mention is also the charter schools. So we did have some outstanding charter school litigation related to sharing of our referendum. So we did share the referendum, but what was still pending, at least the last 2 years of the 4 years, was what do we do about the first 2 years, which equates to about $45 million. And so we did receive a court ruling against the district saying we would have to share the first 2 years of the referendum. We do have the money set aside, but we are now looking to appeal to the Florida Supreme Court. So I don't know if Mr. Littlejohn would like to give any additional explanation.
So as Ms. Frederick said, we did get a very bad ruling, very disappointing from the Fourth DCA. We think there's a fundamental flaw in the majority's opinion there, and that they base their ruling on an argument that the charter schools didn't even make. So the judges basically argued in favor of the charter schools. So that's our main avenue of appeal to the Fourth DCA, or to the Supreme Court. But first, we have filed a notice for rehearing with the Fourth DCA. We don't expect that that's going to go anywhere because they're ideologically, on the opposite side from us. But we're hoping that the Florida Supreme Court will see what a terrible precedent this opinion would be if it is allowed to stand, and might take it up on that grounds.
My recollection is in the ballot or otherwise, this money was supposed to go to the school districts and not
The language was explicitly
in the
stated
ballot.
that it was to
Correct.
go to district-operated schools and not charter schools, and that's why we are taking it all the way to the Supreme Court, that we're not going to share, or we wouldn't share the funds until we were court-ordered, and we're not going to give the retroactive funds until there's truly no other option, because it really was the will of the voters.
You think we got a good shot?
It's a very tough uphill road for us in both courts.
And so the only fortunate thing that I can say is that we have a lot of one-time funds that we've been able to set aside because of the ESSER, the federal dollars, because we've had a pretty high vacancy rate. So we have a lot of one-time savings, and so it's hard to spend one-time savings. You don't want to spend them on recurring costs. So we do have some additional funds set aside if we do have to end up paying those for those first 2 years, plus interest.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move us into the court. These are the two voting items. The quarterly investment report, and we do have a hard stop at 10. There's another meeting in this room at 10 o'clock. So we canceled our last meeting. There were conflicts for committee members. So we're not even going over the December. We're going to focus on the March 31st. I can't tell you we were in full compliance with the investment policy. There were no issues whatsoever. But I also don't want to go through old news at this point. So, Richard, I'm going to hand this over to you. Do you want to try to do a brief market update?
Sorry, yeah, we'll just jump to page 7 of the report. Kyle really went in depth on the most significant event in the first quarter, which was the banking kerfuffle, using his word. So there's sort of two significant things that sort of reflect how we are going to manage the portfolio going forward. One is the shift in the level of interest rates and market sentiment about how much further the Fed is going to go is going to drive us to try and extend duration, trying to get back to match the benchmark duration. And the second is overweighting towards more credit and corporate investments now that we have wider spreads. Now there's been sort of a repricing of risk in that market. So, throughout the course of the first quarter, we had a big shift in view. In February, there was a big labor report, big jobs report that came out that showed that there was something like 530-something thousand net new jobs added to the economy. Up to that point, traders had generally thought that the Fed was about done, and so their sort of forecasts of where the Fed funds rate levels were going to be were below what the Fed itself had been projecting in December. So following that report, it looked like the economy was stronger and that the Fed may actually have to go higher. And so the market sort of repriced rates and pushed them to the top of the curve there, and they're actually projecting that rates would be higher than the Fed was actually projecting. So fast forward to what happened in March with the banks, and that view has shifted significantly lower. Now the market thinks that the Fed at its next meeting will raise interest rates another quarter point and then be on pause and potentially may even shift, depending on whose forecast you look at, to lowering interest rates as we go into the latter part of the year. So this has been a big shift. As a result of that, the market value component of returns were positive over the course of the quarter because of the drop in interest rates. And now there's a general view that changes in sort of the banking environment is going to do the job of the Fed in terms of helping to fight inflation and basically effectively create a quarter point to half a point of sort of rate increase impact without the Fed actually having to raise interest rates. So if you go to the next slide, go to 11. So, along with sort of those changes, we've also seen an increase in spreads in credit. So we've seen the yield benefit of investing out in corporate type instruments actually increase through the course of the first quarter. And the chart on the right there sort of puts it in sort of a historical context compared to what we saw during the financial crisis. So, when interest rates were very low, near zero, 2020, 2021, spreads were really, really tight. There wasn't as much relative value, and that started to increase last year, and it's increased even more this year. So we are taking advantage of that. Again, through our credit process, really focusing on the higher quality names within that sort of fit our parameters and the profile of our type of investors. Why don't you jump to page 13? So this just reflects returns for the first quarter. Unlike a year ago and most of last year, where we kept sort of coming in and talking about negative returns, we're actually starting to see positive returns. Both from now being at these higher 4% and 5% interest rate levels and the fact that we did see sort of a pause in rate increase and actually a decline in rates over the course of the quarter. So all that contributed to a very strong return for the quarter. Jump to page 18, which is just a sort of a snapshot summary of the two portfolios we manage, both the short-term and the longer-term portfolio. Short-term portfolio, as we talked about before, is heavily invested at the end of the year and then just pays out sort of over the course of the year, sort of accelerating in its decline through the summer months and into the fall. And those rates, were invested again when rates were very high. You see the yield on cost for the portfolio in the 5% range. The core portfolio still reflects sort of the purchases that were made over the past 2 years, but as we've had maturities roll off, they're being invested in rates from 4 to 5%. Next slide. So portfolio was in compliance with the policy at quarter end. Jump to page 18. Oops, sorry, 24. Actually 28. Can't read my numbers here. So this shows the actual returns for the longer term portfolio, the total returns. The first quarter was positive, 1.4% return for the quarter. You underperform the benchmark because the portfolio continues to be very short relative to the benchmark duration. The portfolio's duration is something like 1.4% compared to 1.7, 1.8 for the benchmark. As we see this pause in rate increases, that will allow us to sell securities at a gain and start reinvesting those and reinvesting maturities out to bring that duration back up over the course of the next 2 quarters in line with the benchmark. So because of the conservative position, when rates dropped this quarter, you underperform. But as you can see from the 1-year number right next to it, the conservative position really helped you while rates were rising over the course of last year. So I'll pause there for any questions. I know we kind of spent a lot of time on the sort of meat of the quarter talking about the banking issues.
Any questions there?
I've got one. Sorry.
Okay.
That, these are all nominal returns. How should we put this in the context of, what's now a low single-digit inflation? Just give me a way to think about it, conceptual way to think about it.
Yeah, so, inflation's now at 5%. Your portfolio earnings are now at 5%. I think last year we had a big mismatch when we were at the 9 and, 7 and 6%, and you were moving from 2% to 4%, et cetera. Now you're sort of in line. The outlook projections for inflation are downward, and the outlook for interest earnings here are sort of, level, and then they start going downward. So you're sort of matched, now, and more in line, and more trending towards what we saw before we went through the big increase last year.
Good, thank you.
Okay, we have our own version of the quarterly investment report as well. And I'm not going to go through all the information that Richard had, but I did want to point out, interest earnings, these are the real numbers. It's I think it was $36 million of interest so far this year, and you can see it's much higher than it has been in previous years. We're tracking all the benchmarks and actual returns here. We just note that the way the portfolio is broken out, comparison to benchmark, the interest earnings, tax collections were at 92%, which is a little less. It was 93% the same period last year, but pretty close. Sales tax collections continue to outperform our projections, and I have that report included here. This is including everything that PFM is managing, as well as all the local government investment pools, the money markets, and we also show the portfolio for our debt, everything with the Bank of New York and the trustee. Technically, that's not part of the investment policy. It's not governed by the policy. I like to see it all. It's all investments, so I like to put it on here. So this is just showing the whole portfolio. We do have a lot overnight and 6 months, but the returns we're getting make it worthwhile to keep it in overnights right now. We may start looking at laddering some more of that out. If we see that tipping point when the rates start to really come down, we'll be looking at investing some of that. But again, this is mostly short term. It's covering payroll. It's covering the electric bills. So that's just the nature of the school district's budget and how we manage cash. The asset allocation, and this is my colorful chart. We have some updates to do with what we're doing for the rest of the year. We have some securities maturing. That's what the green is. The green is cash, and we will be reinvesting it, putting it somewhere else. But we know we have things maturing, and we need to decide what to do with it. So that's why it's going up here. We skipped through the actual holdings. I wanted to bring up the sales tax report. Let's make this a little bigger. We're at about 123% of projections. At this point, I'm monitoring projections, but I'm now looking at year over year to see where we're at. And for the last quarter that was on here, which was January's receipts, that's 9% growth year over year. We just got the data for February. That came in yesterday, or the day before, yesterday it came in. And it's at 5% year over year. So one of the things we're watching is, as the economy shifts and changes, will the sales tax growth year over year slow down? I have no doubt that we're going to end up sunsetting this and ending it a year early because we're so far ahead of projections. We expected over this time period to have collected 773 million. We're at 956 million. We're well above projections. So the ordinance, the interlocal agreement we have with the county, said that if we hit a certain level on any September 1st, we would shut it down a year early. And I talk to the folks at the county regularly. They have the same opinion. We're all expecting it'll close a year early. But everything's working well.
2025?
Yeah, we would end it in December of 2025 instead of December 2026.
So we then go for it again?
That's certainly being discussed, especially when you consider that we'll be sharing capital outlay millage with charter schools. That's $400 million over plus that we'll be losing. And that number's going to get bigger because remember, it's being ramped up in the front end. So that number is going to get higher. So we will certainly be looking for other revenue streams because we're going to lose money. And that's all in the capital plan. And we have projects that we're
Well,
planning
that
to do.
takes a vote, correct?
It would have to go back to the voters. Right now, there's two different sales taxes. The one we have right now shares with the county. In the past, the 2004 sales tax was the school capital outlay tax. There is a difference in statute, which I expect to go away. Right now, the school capital outlay tax requires you to share with charters. The local government infrastructure does not require that. I think that's just a matter of time before that law is changed as well. But it still would be more money coming in. So that's something that's being discussed. I don't think a decision's been made, but we're certainly looking at it, especially in light of losing money that we planned on having. The line of credit will expire on July 31st. And we really don't need it anymore. DNC is called, do we need it? No, we're good. We have plenty of cash. So whenever construction says can we advance something? And for those of you that are staying for the sales tax committee meeting, you'll see lots of agenda items where we're moving things up because they have capacity to get the work done. I have the cash, so we're moving things up to try to expedite it. Especially with rising construction costs, you talk about inflation. Construction inflation, I think, is a lot higher than what we see as the normal CPI. So if we can expedite that work, we certainly want to do that. Plus, it makes a better environment for the kids, and that's what it's really all about at the end of the day. Any questions on investments? I have one more thing I wanted to go through. We have had a number of contracts that I was planning to bring to you in February, and we didn't have the meeting. So some of these have already gone to the board to be approved, but I didn't want this to happen without you knowing about it. So we had our banking contract, currently with Wells Fargo. We went to the board to extend it for 120 days. We have an ITN on the street right now. Responses are due on May 12th. Somebody asked me that date earlier, and I said it wrong. It's May 12th. I'm going to propose a finance committee meeting on June 2nd. And my thought is we could review the responses, the results of that banking RFP, and also go over policies at that meeting. So if you all could get back to me afterwards, and I'll send an email as a reminder, if you could let me know if that date works. We're planning to take the contract to the board June 14th. So that would be a good day from the district's perspective. If we go the next week, the district is closed on that Friday. So we'd have to shift to another day of the week. During the summer, we do 4-day weeks, and the district is closed on Fridays. So I'm trying to do it when we still have Fridays. So I'll send a note on that.
You have somebody from the finance committee on the committee?
No, we asked, and we asked at a previous meeting, and you all did not want to do that. You're welcome to attend if you would like. But everybody said no, they didn't want to score. I understand that it's a lot of work to score it. I've got days set aside right now to read them all. It does take some time to go through those. There's also the custody banking contract. We're working with TD Bank. They're willing to extend it at the same rate, which is 0.8 basis points, which is under the market. And they're willing to extend it for 5 years, and we're happy with the service there. So it's a very small dollar amount. We're just doing a direct negotiation to extend that. The legal contracts for Bond Counsel and Disclosure Counsel, It's for 5 years, and I think we're starting year 4, but we have it set up to 1-year increments. So we just took the 1-year renewal to the board. Again, I would have shown that to you in February, but I don't want you to be surprised. We went ahead and took it to the board. And then just a heads up, the underwriting contract does end at the end of the calendar year. So I'm working on an ITN for that as well. And those results would come to the committee at a future meeting. So lots of things going on with contracts as well. And I think that's all we have. At the back of the agenda, I did mention, it's there as well, but I will send you an email calendar invite for June 2nd, if you could just let me know if that works. If it doesn't, I'll start looking for another day. And it would be 8 to 10. Same room, same time, same place, same station.
Are we going to need the 10 that you're showing?
I don't think, no, I don't think so. I didn't want to cancel it. I'm leaving it there just in case something comes up with budget or something else, but I expect I'm going to cancel that one. No, we still don't need to do a TAN. We still have plenty of cash. That, the one-time federal subsidies coming in, we will spend that down. As Laura mentioned, the fund balance, we're planning to spend that down, but we don't need a TAN yet. I don't think we could justify it. And that's really all I have. I want to thank all of you. Oh, and I want to make sure I mention while we're on camera, this will be Blair Littlejohn's last meeting with us. He's retiring. He's joining Steve
Well, hey, listen, what about a party?
May 26th. I'll be happy to send you the flyer. There is a gathering. And I wanted to introduce Kristen Vara. She's going to be filling Blair's shoes when it comes to debt. So we've already had one meeting, and Tricia Morales was on that as well, trying to help them understand everything that goes on with COPS and the complexity of the real estate documents and the surveys and all the documents we need to gather. Trying to take advantage of Blair as long as we have him. He's actually here through the end of May, but this would be the last committee meeting. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned.
Thank you, Blair. You've been with us right through all the thick and thin, it seems.
It's my pleasure. It's been great working with all of you.
Yeah, he's thrilled to, said, you're going to miss negotiating the underwriter's contract this year. And that was the reaction I got.
We have cocktails at 4 a.m.
So, Barbara, you have anything to add? Thank you for being here and watching all this develop.
I learn more all the time. And I do want to tell you that this is ridiculous, but my grandson is taking financial accounting. And so I've been doing a lot of studying to help him also. And so that first piece about the government and the social, et cetera, I'm getting better at this finance stuff. Thank you all very much.
Great. Good to hear. Okay, thank you all very much.
Okay.
We're adjourned then.
Once more, thanks,
Could I,
Steve Alexander.
could I
And
do one?
congratulations, Steve, again,
one-
and Blair both.
Could I do one more? I think you said, Leanne, and stop me if I'm putting words in your mouth, that we're going to know the outcome of the Tallahassee activity next month.
Next week.
And so next time we're together, you'll have at least a rough view for us of what effect it's going to have on our cash flow.
Yes.
And we'll begin to noodle about what our
Yeah, you're going
plans
to
are.
be, that June 2nd date, there's actually a budget advisory committee meeting the week before, and there could possibly be one right after our meeting.
Well, the Budget Advisory Committee is on the 26th of May, and then our board workshop is on the 7th of June.
Good.
And really, I mean, we do have to wait until we get to our 11-day count, see what our enrollment looks like.
Okay.
And then even going into October through December, what does enrollment look like statewide? Because it's not just Palm Beach County, because the way that the budget is developed at the state level is a projected enrollment statewide. And if the projected enrollment is less, we don't get any more money. If projected enrollment is more statewide, they take money away from us in order to cover it. But they have set aside right now, it looks like the House upped the reserve that they were setting aside for the vouchers, because they do believe they underestimated. There's just so much uncertainty about how much it's going to be.
Yeah.
So they've set aside a reserve of, I believe, 350 million to try to cover any potential shortfall, but we really won't know. And I always set aside, we're more conservative, so we set aside a higher amount than even what the state tells us to set aside for vouchers,
Good.
for most everything, because
You answered my question, which was what effect will it have on our, what I'll call our demand side, our enrollment, and therefore what our spending requirements are, and also what longer term, what our investment requirements are.
and
Thank you.
we adjust our staffing based on actual enrollment, and we do that adjustment at the 11-day count. And we monitor really throughout the year.
That won't be until this fall.
It really won't be until the fall that we'll have a better idea.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. All set?
All set?
We're adjourned.
Thank you all very much.